Suhagji, you've been involved deeply in the fight against SB 403, also the whole, the fighting of the case against CRD as well. I think you need to give us a little bit of an understanding of the harm to law. That is actually the name of this session, that we are seeing today with the way the CRD's high-handedness and even some abuse that we are seeing. Also, the way the voices have been silenced when we are talking about SB 403. What is your experience? I mean, you have been in this game for a longer time than most of us have. Maybe you can give us a pre and post sort of understanding of, when this game started, the caste game, as I call it, how you've seen America evolve and how you think we can handle this harm to law that we are seeing today.
This is, in some sense, the elephant in the room that has haunted not just the Hindu tradition, but the Hindu community globally, as far as it being a entrenched stereotype that presents us as, primitive, savage, oppressive people. And, to your point, Richaji, yes, we've been working on this for a long time, probably since day one of when we started the Hindu American Foundation back in 2003. And back then I'd say that, I never thought I would say this, but the battle almost seemed easy. It was really on the narrative front. And I'm not dismissing the narrative, but, we were talking about seeing, this very reductive and false idea of a four-tiered caste system with priests on the top and all the way down. I don't need to repeat what that is about, because pretty much from 6th grade onwards, American school children are taught about this. The media covers our entire community as well as the Indian civilization through this lens. And so we were fighting this battlefront with textbooks, that how are young Hindu Americans and beyond Hindu Americans, how are young Americans learning about their neighbors who might be Hindu? How are they getting prepped for an ever increasingly globalized world where they will be working with other Hindus and with other Indians? And so, we have made significant changes working with a number of partners, including Sandeep Ji with his work with Hindu Education Foundation and others. I never imagined that we would see caste weaponized the way we have in the past 3 to 5 years. I know that, Richaji, you've written a takedown of the Equality Lab survey, which is really kind of the linchpin of where we are today. I wrote about it as well in India Abroad, and thought it was deeply troubling, where you're falsifying data, throwing out responses that don't fit the end result that you want. Everything that a good statistician would say is the biggest no-no for a generalizable survey. Never imagined that would then turn around and become the foundation from which city, state governments and governmental entities would use falsified data to demonize and deny us our civil rights. So, that's kind of the broad context. We've seen caste being weaponized in a number of arenas. I think the first place was in campus non-discrimination policies. And all of this kind of it revolves around non-discrimination. And therein lies one of the challenges, because the optics to anyone not within even within our community as well as outside our community is, if we're trying to address discrimination, it's a good thing. And of course it's a good thing. But the bottom line is that you cannot address a problem by creating an even bigger one. And that's exactly what's happened. Whether we're looking at caste being added as a standalone category to campus non-discrimination policies, to where we saw Santa Clara County attempting the same thing. Then we saw the city of Seattle doing it. And now we are at the state of California, facing a bill that would add not caste as a standalone category anymore, but a clarification of ancestry. But what the biggest problem with this particular category is that equal protection, which is one of the fundamental rights that the US Constitution and every state constitution in this country promise, is equality under the law. And when you look at the other classes that have been created to ensure that all people are treated equally, whether it's in the employment sector, in the housing sector, in schools, as well as public accommodations, or in lending and in banking, they are categories that are called facially neutral. We have categories like race, national origin, ancestry, religion, gender, sex. Any one of these categories do not single out or are not exclusively associated with any single one group of people. Everyone has a race. Everyone has an ancestry. Everyone has a sex or gender. The category of caste is a stark departure from every single one of those categories, because you have a category that is not just exclusively associated with, they say South Asia, that's a cover. At the end of the day, this is really about Indians and Hindus. So you have a category that is exclusively associated with one ethnic and religious minority. That's just the plain meaning of the term. But then you have ordinances like we saw in Seattle, or even in the policies that we've seen being passed as a result of student activism, also working hand in glove with Equality Labs, where they're actually defining defining caste as something that's exclusively associated with South Asian. They will use Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra as a mask for their target, which is Hindus. So you have seen an insertion of a category that is seeking to ethnically profile and police us as an ethnic minority. And that is the very crux of a denial of equal protection. And I would say that the CRD, in enforcing the law, the non-discrimination laws in California, even in the absence of caste as an actual category, has done exactly the same thing that all of these other bodies, whether it's colleges, cities, counties, or the state of California, have done.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Suhagji. So Suhagji, maybe, if you want to weigh in on some of the recent aftermath of, the Judiciary Committee's the vote at the Assembly, and the trajectory of the bill, as well as what you think can we foresee something in the future?
Absolutely. I think that the silver lining of this dark cloud is, not only is this room filled up on a Sunday afternoon, but hundreds, if not thousands, of people of Indian origin in California picked up the phone, called their assembly member, something that they may not have done ever before in their life here in America. Even maybe a fewer went out and took time to set up meetings with their assembly members. And I think what's been, in some sense, gratifying for me is to have, ordinary people in our community who are just doing their job, raising their children, doing the best that they can at their jobs, talk to me, and sometimes they may not know who I am, and they talk to me about equal protection and due process, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Some people are even talking about facial neutrality. That is what community empowerment looks like. And so I want to be sure that we don't lose sight of that. There's a ton of work to be done. In fact, the work that needs to be done is 100-fold more than what's already been done. But to bring it back to SB 403, we know that the Senate version that passed was facially discriminatory, and very clearly so. It had very demonizing, discriminatory, and disparaging accusations without any sort of substantiation made about South Asians broadly, about caste discrimination existing in all of our institutions, in our places of worship, that people within our community were committing horrendous crimes like rape or human trafficking and wage theft and all sorts of things on the basis of caste. Earlier iterations specifically mentioned India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nepal. So that passed as is. I think that there were fewer people in the community that were speaking out against it, but there was also, I think, even the people were actually making thousands of calls. Let me take that back. And I know that members of the Senate just kind of wanted this issue to go away. And there's, as I said at the beginning of my remarks, the optics issue. We're doing something good. We're helping a community that's facing discrimination without taking that second level thought process that was required to say, wait a minute, even if there is a form of discrimination that's occurring in this community, what solution, or first, do we even need a solution, or does existing law already cover it? But second, in the solution that we're jumping to create, are we creating a new problem? And the new problem is obvious in that it's created stigma and essentially institutionalized horrible and false stereotypes about who we are. But I think there was such an inundation of calls and meetings at the Senate level that they just kind of wanted to just get it off their plate, because that would at least make the phone calls stop. And so it passed as is. With the Assembly, what we found is that so the Judiciary Committee has what's called a committee consultant. So does the Senate Judiciary Committee. And they are supposed to analyze the law from a legal perspective. They are supposed to take the perspectives of those who are supporting it and opposing it and kind of create a summary and then make a legal conclusion. Now, what we saw with the Senate summary was that you would not find a single mention of equal protection or due process, in spite of the fact that every community member that was calling, writing, or meeting with members of the Senate were raising these very issues. At the Assembly Judiciary Committee analysis, what we find is that there is an acknowledgement that there is an issue here, that there is language here that is singling out and targeting a particular group. So the recommendation of the analyst was to remove all of that language. The other thing that we had was that caste was a standalone category. Now, what I mean by that is that I mentioned those other categories in non-discrimination law. You have race, you have religion, you have national origin, ancestry, and then there was what SB 403 was asking for is to add caste alongside that. So caste would be at the same level as race. Caste would be at the same level of sex or gender. Caste would be on the same level as national origin. All the things that I said, that those words, race, national origin, or sex, are things that apply to everyone, but all of a sudden you have a category that only applies to one group, not just by its plain meaning, but also by the very declarations made about South Asians and about caste being something that was integral to South Asian communities. What the analysts proposed is that we need to take caste out of the categories as a standalone, but we need to maybe clarify ancestry, which is probably the area in which maybe some of the indigenous social identities that not just Indians carry, but a lot of ethnic minorities might carry, or even racial groups might carry, that ancestry is the category under which, if someone has faced any sort of discrimination based on where they were born or the community that they were born to, or a particular cultural practice, that they can find legal remedy under ancestry. Now, had ancestry been defined, so at that point, as we're having conversations with the consultant, he had mentioned that he was looking to amend the language of the bill in order to make it less constitutionally problematic. And at that point, we were working with a number of other community groups, and the idea of proposed amendments had come up. And this is something that we had actually drafted the day the spot bill was removed and the original SB 403 bill had come, is how can we, as a community, say, look, we're against all forms of discrimination, but we can't discriminate in order to address discrimination. So we'd come up with proposed amendments to say, let's clarify ancestry in case there's any confusion. And we can define it with words like lineal descent, parentage, heritage, community. There was no appetite for that when this bill was with the Senate. At the Assembly level, we saw that there was an appetite for it. So the analyst took the recommendations, and many people in the community that were meeting got behind those amendments. And our line in the sand was that the word caste should not be included in any sort of clarification for these very reasons. We even went a step further. We shouldn't even use words like tribe or clan, because even those words are very often attributed to communities of color, to ethnic minorities, that let's clarify the law so that there's no confusion as to what our responsibilities are towards non-discrimination, but also what our rights are in non-discrimination. Unfortunately, this became a political football. And so while they took at least 3 or 4 of the words that we had suggested or phrases that we had suggested in the amendment, Senator Wahab, her line in the sand was that caste had to stay. The community's line in the sand was that caste had to go. Of course, this is inside football, and they're going to go with what's going to make it expedient, not just for this particular bill. Keep in mind that both the entire California legislature has close to 2,600 bills in front of it. So if you cave on this particular bill, this is the bill that's most important to our community, but there's thousands of others. So for their own interests in passing their legislation, these types of wheelings and dealings occur. And so what passed was a bill, an amended version of the bill in which caste was removed as a standalone category. That, to me, it was a win, or at least I don't want to use the word win even, but a gain. They removed all the declarations, which were the racist statements, the unsubstantiated false accusations made about the South Asian community as a whole was removed. And then ancestry was clarified. However, in that clarification, caste was included amongst the other words: lineal descent, parentage, heritage, and caste is now defined as inherited social status in shorthand, but something longer and completely unintelligible. I like to call it verbal, gymnastics of a definition. So that's what passed the Senate. Now, most likely it's going to pass the Assembly. It's most likely going to pass the Assembly. Why? Because you have 2 of the Indian origin Assembly members who have already said that they're going to vote yes for it. And that basically gives everyone a free pass. So this is something that, we've used this to build a momentum amongst the community and wake the community up. But ultimately, these types of things are going to be won in the courts. And I just want to spend just maybe 1.5 minutes, if that's okay, on the pending lawsuits on this issue. Sundar Iyer, who I think is someone that is a true hero. The types of targeted harassment that he has faced and the sheer denial of civil rights to stand up against a state is no easy task. And I think that we all owe a debt of gratitude for someone who stood up, because I'll tell you, over 90% of cases get settled out of court. To stand strong and even Cisco to stand behind him is really a testament to the truth. And so we know that the way in which the Civil Rights Department filed its suit not only denied Ramana and Sundar their basic civil rights, their rights to religious freedom, their rights to due process and equal protection, but it also denied all of us our rights to the First Amendment. The United States government said at its very founding that it has zero right to intervene in religion. That means that they cannot define a religion. They cannot make proclamations about what a religion is or isn't. What did the CRD do? They defined the caste and caste oppression as integral to Hindu teachings and practices. So we filed first what's called a motion to intervene to say, hey, listen, we are not a party to this case. We don't know exactly what happened factually. Now we do. But at that point, we didn't. And we filed a motion to intervene to say the way in which the CRD has filed this case denies not just these 2, but the rest of us our fundamental civil rights. As the case started getting stuck in negotiations with the arbitration clause and all these other technicalities, we thought that, with seeing what was happening in Seattle, seeing what had happened in Santa Clara County, that we've got to nip this in the bud. So we just decided to sue the Civil Rights Department directly. And Sundar mentioned that in January of 2022, we sued the state directly for a violation of civil rights of all Hindus and people of Indian origin in the state of California. We also have a third pending legal action, and that is where we are serving, we meaning 2 lawyers here at the Hindu American Foundation, serving on the legal team, representing 2 faculty members at Cal State University for the adoption of a caste policy there, for the same kinds of arguments that it's a denial of equal protection. And in the case of Cal State University, also a legal concept called void for vagueness, that they have not defined caste. So they've created basically this deep ambiguity that is prone now for arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement. So I think ultimately we're going to have to go to the courts. We are already in the courts, though, and hopefully the decisions that come down on any one of these three cases will support our fight against SB 403, or at least be able to counter it after the fact.
Thank you so much. That was.
I want to just say something about, since two remarks came out, that Hindu is a religion or Hindu is a violent, Hindu gods are violent. Hindu gods are a form of Adi Shakti as Saraswati, Brahmaji as creator of humankind. For science, Ayurveda, yoga, meditation to communicate with gods through meditation. Lakshmi Vishnu ji are the preserver, showing us culture, non-violent way of living as humans on earth and world. And yeah, so we Hindus do mantras, diya and havan and pujas to invoke our Hindu gods. So Hindu is a religion. For example, I'll just give you short. Indonesia, 1,000 years back, 900 years back, was a Muslim nation, a Hindu nation, converted to Muslim by saying, by Muslim, that Hindu is a way of life and Hindu is not a religion. And we are from Indonesia. And so today, Hindus are mostly Muslims because they were told Hindu is a way of life and Hindu is not a religion. So I just want to mention that Hindu is a religion. We invoke our Hindu gods.
Very important.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure
Richa
this is a question or.
Could I just make a quick point about that, if that's okay?
Yes, please, quickly.
So I think that this is a really important point, because very often I hear in our community that Hinduism is a way of life and not a religion. If we held on to that truth, we wouldn't be able to file a First Amendment claim. So I think it's very important that two things can be true. That is very much a part of our tradition as well, where you can have multiple views at the same time. And so I think it's really important that, yes, Hinduism is a culture. Yes, it's a way of life. Yes, it's a religion. Otherwise, we are really writing ourselves out of the protections, at least in the way that not just the US civil rights apparatus is set up, but also internationally. Religious freedom is the very crux, and without it, we would basically be erasing ourselves from any sort of legal protections.
Thank you. Thank you, Suhag ji. I think this is a very important information.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.